Talk now, though, to Alan Mendoza, Executive Director with the Henry Jackson Society. Kim Jong-Un is apparently planning to have a meeting in Russia with Vladimir Putin to discuss weapons. Apparently he's going to travel on a train to Russia in some kind of bulletproof carriage of some description. Let's find out what is all this about. Alan, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, I mean, Kim Jong-Un hasn't been heard much from, really, I suppose, since the meeting with Donald Trump, which was much heralded at the time. He's gone a bit quiet, really, hasn't he? So what's going on here?
Well, no, he has been developing his nuclear weaponry, and he's been developing other forms of weaponry. He's been, launching missiles at his neighbours or over them just to sort of demonstrate his prowess. And what's going on now is that he sees an opportunity quite clearly with Russia weakened to extend his influence and get a new ally or an enhanced ally in Moscow, try and ship some of his kit over to them and get some either technology or money or alliances in return.
Yes. And I mean, I suppose from Russia's point of view, they need all the friends they can get at the moment.
Oh, completely. I mean, what's extraordinary about this is that Russia, the so-called military superpower, is now looking to North Korea to supply it with weaponry, at least if we believe the reports. And that's an extraordinary humiliation, I would say, for the Russian military machine. It can't produce enough of its own material to prosecute a war it started. It tells you how weak Russia actually is once you start pushing at it.
Yes. And, I mean, as far as the state of North Korea is concerned, again, it's a place we don't know much about. We don't really get access to North Korean news very often. Since the Trump sort of visit, what has been going on there in terms of their capabilities, in terms of their finances, if you like?
Well, of course, sanctions have been in place for a long time, given their nuclear program, and have clearly hurt the economy. We know that internally it's suffering. However, the repression is extreme, and so you don't hear much about it because there's just no way of getting much information out. Now, Kim has been trying hard to extend his military arsenal, and potentially he's paranoid about being taken out. And he has been getting, help from the Chinese in this regard. He's obviously looking to extend that now to the Russians as well, because he's very paranoid, and he doesn't want to just be, in the hands of one potential ally. He needs to spread them out and about.
Right.
So from this perspective, he is looking to continually enhance his own power, his military power, and what he can get for his weapons elsewhere.
Yes. I mean, is Russia even in a position to do any weapons deals with North Korea at the moment, given that they're using most of their weapons in Ukraine?
Well, it's been extraordinary. Well, it's going to be buying equipment from North Korea, so that's the whole point. He's going to cover his losses by buying an equipment from North Korea. That's what he's trying to do. But it's extraordinary if you think about it. Russia is a permanent member of the UN Security Council. These are UN sanctions on North Korea, given its nuclear behaviour. Yeah. And for the Russians essentially to, likely either sell, to give them oil and food and money in exchange for the weaponry breaks all those sanctions. So again, you have to wonder what kind of power Russia really is.
Yes. Well, I suppose if you want to worry about sanctions and whether or not anybody's going to adhere to them, you're going to leave Russia out of the ball game anyway, aren't you? Because they're not likely to do anything that the rest of the world wants them to do.
Well, the Russians have always pretended to be a, sort of leading international power that works with the United Nations. That's always been the mantra of, Russian leaders going back, for years. So for it to openly now go against the UN once again here just tells you that this is indeed a broken regime that has no interest in any international connectivity. And that should tell any potential allies of Russia not to do deals with Russia, because Russia will break them. It will use it to its own advantage. And, you cannot be secure doing any kind of arrangement with Russia, because they'll break it at will and there'll be no international comeback on that.
I mean, one of the places that they can still do business with quite happily is the UAE, isn't it? And there's quite a good connection business-wise with Russia and that part of the world. But will that go on for a long time, do you think?
Well, I think, there's all sorts of parts of the world. UAE is one example. The Gulf, there are opportunities there for them. India is another. The Russians are not frozen out, of course, kind of internationally in this regard. But there is, there are limited places they can get weapons from, realistically, looking at what they need. Their likeliest supply partners are Iran, who've been supplying drones, of course, North Korea and China, when you're actually looking at the people who can give them the weaponry they're going to need to continue this war. So on the defence front, it's actually quite limited as to where they can go.
Yeah, and I mean, as far as the China visit from James Cleverly was concerned last week, do you think this might have come up then?
I don't think that would have been a question that would have been brought up between Cleverly and the Chinese, because I think part of this has been, a very recent discovery about what's going on with, the potential visit of Kim to Russia. But by the way, it's not certain he will go. Now that this has been leaked publicly, his paranoia is extreme. And you were talking about a bulletproof train, etc.
Yeah.
I mean, he's out very infrequently from North Korea. Hasn't been out the country for 4 years. Last time he just about made it over the border to Vladivostok. So it's unclear whether he will actually go. And the Americans, I suppose, are trying to ramp up the pressure on him as well as the Russians to try and make a leader-to-leader summit unlikely.
Yes. And I mean, as far as the succession, if you like, in North Korea goes, I mean, who would be the next in line for to run the place if something would happen to him?
Well, nobody has a clue right now as to what that succession process is. I mean, they don't. It's normally familial, but his children are young, so it's I suppose you could see some kind of regency system developing, because it has been, if you like, a family dictatorship since his grandfather essentially founded the regime and his father then took it over. But I suspect he intends to try and live as long a life as possible, and part of that is knowing that he may well be at more danger should he leave North Korea, where his control is pretty absolute, whereas outside it isn't. So he is paranoid. He's very careful about where he goes, what he does, how he's seen publicly. And there are all rumours of body doubles and all of this sort of thing. So, his survival is very much foremost on his mind.
Yes, I can imagine. So if it were to happen, what's the sort of alleged date that it might happen?
Well, they're saying, later this month. So it could be any time, obviously, in this way. We haven't got a date yet. But I imagine everybody now watching to see what will be planned and whether there will be a sort of a great public declaration. Putin will, of course, would love to have a foreign leader visit, of course. He's had Mr. Erdogan just visit, of course, one of our NATO allies turning up in Russia. So he likes these occasions. He will obviously make a big deal of it. Whether Kim would like such a big deal in quite the same way is another matter, that we'd have to see.
Yeah, absolutely right. Alan, thanks for talking to us. Good to hear from you. Alan Mendoza, Executive Director of the Henry Jackson Society. Interesting possibilities going on there. And, of course, the White House is saying that they are rather concerned because they've got information that arms negotiations between the two countries are actively advancing. What that means for the rest of us remains to be seen. Mitch in North London says, Mike, I wonder how many of your viewers and listeners realise that over the last 23 years, the population of London has grown by more than the population of the whole of Germany. I presume you mean the growth rather than the actual number.